Bruce Wyatt, I'm your territory manager for MacDon. Been with the company 16 years, getting ready to start my 17th harvest. Seen a lot of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And my job today is to share as much of it with you today as possible to save you any kind of, give you the least opportunity for breakdowns, unnecessary expenses, and to make sure you get the most out of your header. We're also going to be talking about the new FD2, kind of mixing them together, talk about the high points of the FD2 where I'm getting so many compliments, and then also be talking about maintenance, wear items, adjustments, operating tips, all kinds of good stuff to try and help you out. That's important stuff, but this is more important. It's the most important thing I'm going to say all day. That is, thank you. Thank you for your business. We appreciate you as customers. I'm just one person of about 1,600 or so that work at MacDon. So on behalf of the guy that, runs the paint shop or is wearing underneath a hood hot all day, painting the headers, or the gal that loads up the headers on the trucks, all the way up to our CEO, Kurt Bueller. If they were here, they would say the very same thing. We appreciate your business. As I like to say, I know where my bread is buttered. My paycheck may come from Winnipeg, but I know where the money comes from. So thank you for your business. And if my wife was here, she would tell you the same thing. Thank you for your business. A couple weeks ago, we celebrated 36 years together. So that's a big deal to me. She was eligible for sainthood after about month 2. So I got me a good one. And yep. Got some handouts. If I could get some couple of Bane-Welker folks to help me, I would appreciate it. Everybody, please. This class is for you guys. If you've got questions, if you're not sure about something with anything to do with the header, please ask. This is your clinic. And I like to joke around too, so if you don't ask questions, I'm going to start telling Polish jokes and you don't want to hear them because they're bad. But anyway, starting out, as you know, our header's hydraulically driven. The top beam and the 2 vertical legs are the reservoir for our header. Starting with the FD1 header, we started running hydraulic oil in the header, and we've carried that onto the FD2. So if you've got an FD75 or prior, you need to put 1540 motor oil in your header. To check that fluid level, you want the cutter bar just touching the ground to check the fluid level. You're going to have either a single sight glass here, or you're going to have 2 small round ones. If you've got the 2 small round ones, you want the bottom one full and the top one empty. Unless you have billy goat heels. Does anybody here have billy goat heels? It's pretty flat around here. Okay. So 1540 on the old headers, hydraulic oil on an FD1 and newer. There's also a decal here. I am your Canadian interpreter. So if you're from Canada, it's a decal. It's not a decal. So I'm interpreting for you today. If you got this decal that says important, don't forget to read it. There's a couple of them on here. That's one of them. And it says whenever it gets 50 degrees or colder, let the header run at idle for a few minutes to warm your oil up before you go full blast. So don't forget to do that. Customers who have a new FD2 and maybe only have 30 or 40 hours on it for wheat harvest, or if you haven't ran it yet, you will want to change your hydraulic filter at 50 hours on a brand new header. Other guys that already have our headers, I suggest changing your filter annually. Another thing, if you are new to an FD2, if you've got a new FD2, we also want you to change the fluid in the gearboxes. 85-140. It's the same oil that we've always ran in all of our gearboxes, 85-140. What's different on the FD2 is we now have 2 gearboxes. Everybody else has 1. We now have a main header drive gearbox, and we have a combine completion gearbox. They both take 85-140, and you will check this fluid level with the cutter bar just touching the ground. Remove the check plug. If the oil weeps out or if you can touch it with your finger, your fluid level is good. Also inside the gearbox is a chain. It's also a chain case. So check your chain tension annually. If you've got a new FD2, I would sure check that, dude, after 50 hours or two when I'm doing my 50-hour service. I'll tell you more about that in a second. Another fluid, if you're new to an FD2, another fluid I want you to change is the Wobble box fluid at 50 hours. And it takes 85-140, same as our gearbox. So now to check the chain tension on our gearboxes, you're going to remove a cover off the top of the gearbox, and it's going to take a socket that's going to go on either a nut or a bolt. And then you're going to, and it tells you this in your Draper Clinic handout, you're going to set that at inch pounds. Who here has a torque wrench that reads inch pounds? Yeah, about one or two. The rest of us Polacks, if you don't have one that reads inch pounds, set your chain tension like this, and it helps drive home the point that you don't want to over tighten it. Get your socket that fits the bolt or the nut and put it on an extension. Do not put the extension on a ratchet. Put the extension between your fingers, tighten your fingers, and turn it like so. And when you tighten it up with your fingers and that extension starts to slip, that's enough tension. It drives home the point. Do not over tighten it. If you over tighten it, if you misread it, make sure your glasses are good. It's not foot pounds. If you over tighten it, you're going to break stuff. Let's talk a little bit more about the hydraulic knife drive. There's some really good things about a hydraulic knife drive that we've always had on our flex drapers ever since the FD70. With having a hydraulic driven knife drive, it stalls if you get a horseshoe or an old electric fence post caught in your knife. We design that into it. That 3,500 PSI relief is carried on into the FD2. So that keeps your knife from getting all tore up, breaking guards, breaking sections, and then you're down for an hour if it doesn't stall. So make sure on the older headers, you're going to see the knife drive in a minute. Make sure I tell you how to set your belt tension, because we want that belt to be fiddle string tight so that it stalls when it's supposed to, instead of keeping turning and tearing up your guards and sections. Okay. Our hydraulic driven knife should never stall when you're cutting with the row. However, it can stall if you're opening up a field and you hit 35 or 40 foot of green stem beans, or that one variety of Pioneer beans. It may stall when you hit 40 foot of beans all at once. That's a heck of a shock. So that PSI on that knife drive goes up and it pops the relief. So what I tell customers to do is, when you're opening up your field, you might want to just wag your tail. So you're not hitting 40 foot of beans all at once. Wag the tail of the combine. If you've got some hired operators and you don't want to teach them how to wag their tail because they won't do it anyway, you might want to consider a double knife drive. The FD2 with our new knife drive that I'm going to show you here in a little bit, it stalls less than any header we've ever produced, even though we still have the same 3,500 PSI relief. And I'll show you why here in a little bit. Any questions about the knife drive? Stalling, why we do it, why we designed it into it? Some folks think that's a flaw. I don't, because I don't like selling parts unless I have to. Any questions about the knife drive? Okay. Another thing about knife drive, it's important. Knife speed. Knife speed's important so that it doesn't stall any more than necessary. It is very, very, very important that the first time a header goes on a combine for the first time, whether it's a new head, used head, auction head, whatever, first time you put a head on a combine, warm that oil up like I told you and check your knife speed. And set your RPM, I'll show you where to check it. Set your RPM on your knife drive with warm oil to 640 RPM. Everybody except that one guy. That one guy, he gets 650, but everybody else can do 640. There's always one guy, right? He has to have a little more. Yeah. Yep. So anyway, you can get these, pre-inflation. I think these were about 25 bucks. I think they're 35 bucks. You can get them at Napa now to check the rotation of any shaft or pulley, or you can use it for a pointer. Any questions about knife speed? Very good. The way you adjust the knife speed is by opening or closing a swash plate on that pump that allows more or less flow to it. On the FD2, it's easier to access than the prior model headers. Another nice thing about the FD2 is you're going to notice all this is open. We're not hiding stuff like filters behind shields. Plus, it's letting the bean fuzz fall out so it doesn't get full, and it is going to run cooler just because it's cleaner and more airflow into it. Any questions about the gearbox? The shiny stuff, I'll keep moving on. The shiny stuff on the header, it's not stainless steel, it's aluminum. Or if you're from Europe, it's aluminum. Trying to save weight where we can, but do not get the misconception that this header is lighter. It is not. For example, a 40-foot FD2 is about 750 pounds heavier than a 40-foot prior model, and I'll show you why here in a little bit. We've also done a really nice job with our fit and finish with the poly covers. They're open on the bottom to let bean fuzz and dust and dirt fall out, so it doesn't give you trouble with your reel because the reel lines are back behind those covers. Who here has a FD70 or 2162? Who here has one? Have you had any trouble with your reel lift, reel fore and aft, acting weird, and then the hydraulic line inside the back tube's bad? Yes, it can happen. That's why we moved them out of the back tube. Do your best to keep that clean inside the back tube. If you've got the FD70 or 2162, blow it out with a big compressor once in a while. And oftentimes, if you find that your reel is acting weird, you may not find the leak because there's so much bean fuzz in there it acts like oil dry. So you can't find it. So if your reel's acting weird, most of the time it's a line. When you take that line out, do not put another line back in it. Have the guys make you up a hydraulic hose so you don't have that problem again. Draper belt tension is perfect on this header. See where the white indicator is in this slot? The white indicator needs to be on the inside half of that slot. And if you read the decal says it's the inboard half. Well, that means the inside half down here in the US. I have to interpret for you again. If you need to tighten or loosen your side draper belt, it is with this bolt here. When I tighten this bolt, I'm tightening my belt. When I loosen the bolt, I'm loosening the belt. Do not put an impact on this. I think the FD2's got a keeper on the bolt, but I don't think the prior model heads do. And if you put an impact on it, zing, that dude's gonna come flying out. So I wanna loosen up the belt here to show you something here in a little bit, but I also wanna show you, see when I'm loosening the belt, watch the indicator, see which way it's moving. Which way is it moving for those that can't see? Which way is it moving when I loosen the belt? It's going out. So if your side draper belt indicator looks like that, it's too loose. And you're gonna slip it, and the drive roller is gonna keep turning. And then guess what you're gonna do to your side draper belt? You're gonna burn a hole in it. If you run too less tension, the drive roller is gonna keep turning and it can burn a hole. So yeah, you're gonna end up changing it. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen it up some more to show you something here in a little bit. Once I get it loose with my wrench, I can just give it a few turns with my hand. And now I'm going to walk around the end of the header here. Even your knife drive belt on the older headers, if you take tension off, they'll last longer. We also have some very handy decals on the header, or decals. If you're from Canada, this is for the header. Keeps you from having to get your book out to know where the grease zerks are. Shows you exactly where the grease zerks are. It shows you the interval between the grease zerks. For example, there are two up here on the top of this decal. They say 100, and it's got an hourglass there, 100 and an hourglass. So those are 100-hour fittings. And then below it, it says 2x, 2 times. What do you think that stands for? 2 Zerks is correct, not 2 pumps. Good guess though. Give that man a hat because he's participating in my session to keep me from telling Polish jokes. Yes, there's 2 grease zerks. I'm glad you point that out because those are 2 that get missed often. Your bell crank. On the top of the header, on both sides of the header, there's 2 grease zerks there, and since they're underneath the cover, especially on the prior model headers, you can see one of the zerks and you can't see the other one. So you forget about that second one, and it doesn't get greased, and then the needle bearings go out, and then the wing flex don't work right, and then you have to end up doing what to fix it? Pay money. So make sure you grease it to keep from having to pay money. A way, if you want to inspect your header when you get home to see if those needle bearings are out, you may not know it. See this top link here? This is virtually the exact same thing we have on the prior model headers. This here flat piece of steel is called a top link, and that bell crank is in between it. And when your wing is flexing, that bell crank's going up and down. So if your needle bearing is out, that bell crank's going to get cocked sideways. So when you spot down and look in between here, that bell crank can be cocked sideways. And if it's bad enough, it will rub the inside of these top links and wear the paint off of it and put marks in it. So then you know, time for new needle bearings. Any questions on that one? The new frame is deeper, longer. That's going to do a couple things for you. It's going to improve visibility of the cutter bar on the FD2. It's also going to give you a flatter guard angle. And even though you've got a flatter guard angle, you're going to be running closer with an FD2 than any head you've ever owned. I've been pedaling farm equipment since 1989. I've been in the field with lots of different headers. This thing cuts closer than anything I've ever seen. 8-inch wider side draper belts. If you're standing here, they're 8 inches wider. If you're standing here, they're 8 inches deeper. Why do we have an 8-inch wide deeper belt? Couple of big things. One of them, it's to keep the thing that put us on the map. Smooth, consistent heads first feeding. The agronomics of soybeans and all crops, they're always looking for more. Taller beans, taller canola, taller peas, higher yielding, all of that stuff. So agronomy, we need more room to handle high volume crops. Another reason is this, it's kind of our history. Goes back in the old days. 2004 was the year we introduced our first flex draper, which was a 974. Or it was a Case IH 2062. And we had what sizes, Gary? 30 foot, 36 foot. And that was it. Then shortly after that, we introduced the FD70, and then we had a 40. Shortly after that, we had a 45. And now we got a 50. And I took an order for an FD261 the other day. 61 footers are going to be in a pilot build for 2025. The point I'm trying to make is, when you have a small amount of material here, and now with these headers getting wider and wider and wider, and the agronomy and the higher yielding crops, by the time that mat of material gets over here near the feed area, you've got a big mass of material, and we need room to hold it so that we keep that smooth, consistent heads first feeding. Not only today, but well into the future. Just like the prior model headers, they've done us really well for 10, 12, 15 years. We can't be reactive, guys. We have to be proactive. This header has what you will need not only now, but a decade from now. New knife drive. Before I talk about knife drive, let me mention the 8-inch deeper belts give us 20% increase in capacity. You're going to see that in the sales brochure. And that's more than anybody else that I know of that sells a competitive Draper. And when you run heads in a high volume situation, whether it be a 40-footer or a 50-footer, if you've got a high volume crop, with having a narrower side Draper belt, you can get stalling of that large amount of crop around here, near the feed area. We do not have that stalling. The crop keeps moving and going up in the combine, smooth, consistent, heads first feeding. So no herky-jerky stuff. Okay, new knife drive, direct drive. We also added a 44-pound flywheel. What do flywheels give us? Old timers should know this. Anybody ever started a tractor like that? What's a flywheel going to give us? This is the participation part. Torque, exactly. You heard me say a while ago this FD2 stalls less than prior model headers. That's part of the reason why. One of the first fields I took it to in Ohio, that customer wanted to see what this would do for him. He drove all the way across the field going across the road, trying to make it stall, and it never stalled. I'm not going to say it never stalls because it's got that relief in it, and that one variety of Pioneer that I ran to on the last field I got to, those dang stalks were about as big around as my finger, about like a sapling or willow. And boy, when we hit that, you could tell which ones they were. It was a single knife drive header, and we hit them sideways, and it stopped right away. But much less stalling. And even though our knife does stall, we also have, ever since the FD75 came out, we have a knife reverser. So if you plug the knife, when you reverse the head on an FD75 or newer header, the knife is going to reverse. And it's slow speed, high torque, so it's not moving as fast as it is when you're in the forward position. So it keeps you from having to get out. For you fellas that have FD1 and prior model headers, you got 2 pulleys here, and it's got the drive belt. You can check the speed of those pulleys with that warm oil to set your knife speed at 640 RPM. And you can check this flywheel on a new FD2 at 640 RPM to make sure it's at the right speed. But the knife belt tension is very important. Knife drive belt tension is very important. Your book tells you pounds of deflection. I'm not sure what pounds of deflections is because I'm Polish, but I know what a quarter turn is. So on the older headers, grab your drive belt between the pulleys and twist it with your 2 fingers. 1/4 turn on your knife drive belt to make sure it stalls the knife before it flat spots it or tears up extra parts on the knife that you don't want to pay for. Okay. Any questions about knife drive? Let's talk about servicing the knife head pin. This is one I get on my soapbox about because I still hear guys having trouble. So I keep repeating it, and we still carry this knife assembly on the new FD2. The reason we carry it is because it works and it doesn't break down, and you guys like that. And the reason it works and it doesn't break down is because we keep dirt out of the knife head pin. And that knife head pin is about that far off the dirt. So if we're running right off the dirt, we want to keep the dirt out. To do that, that knife assembly is ingenious in that it has an airtight seal or a vacuum around that knife head pin to keep that dirt from getting in there. That's the plus of it. The negative part of it is when guys overgrease it. What will happen to your knife back if you overgrease that knife head pin? There was one poor guy yesterday at the clinic that admitted that he had overgreased it and broke his knife. He got a hat. Because he also got a lot of hard time from the crowd. But if you're breaking your knife back, or parts folks or service folks, if you hear of a customer saying, I'm breaking my knife 3, 4, 5, 6 feet from the knife head, from the knife drive, I can almost guarantee you 9 times out of 10 it's because he's over greasing it. And here's what happens. We call this the Set It Right multi-tool, but right now it's a knife. And here's my knife head. And here's my grease zerk. When I over-grease that knife head, since we have an airtight seal and a vacuum to keep the dirt out, if I over-grease it, it pushes my knife head down. And it pushes it down enough that you're driving your knife like so, instead of like so. And that's why it's breaking the knife. So, the next question, the participation part of the class is, how often do you grease the knife head pin zerk? Once a year? Incorrect. 25 hours. Because we got a decal. Nope, got a Decal. 25, and it's got an hourglass beside it. How much do you pump in there at 25 hours? 15 pumps? You gonna hook it up to your air compressor to make sure it gets it full? 1 or 2 shots of grease. 1 to 2 pumps every 25 hours. Let's say you got a hired guy. He's new, he's trying to impress you. He gets it out and he's greasing it and he's greasing it and he tells you, man, I've been greasing that every day and man, it's hard to get that grease in there. But man, I'm getting her in there. You got to tell him to stop doing it. And then after you tell him to stop doing it, you got to show him how to fix it. Because he screwed it up, and if you show him how to fix it, then he won't do it again, right? Okay, so you know it's been over-greased, I guess is the point I'm making. Take the grease zerk out. Then get you a rubber mallet or a hammer and a block of wood and tap the bottom of that knife head. And don't do like Polish cousin Dennis and look over the hole when you're doing it because you're going to get an eye full or a face full. You might want to let your hired guy go ahead and do that because then he'll really remember not to do it again if he gets a face full of grease. Sorry if there's any hired guys here. When you tap the excess grease, she's going to shoot out the top. Then put your zerk back in. Then grab your manual grease gun. And as you're pumping grease into it, watch the knife head. And as soon as you see the knife head move, stop. Then resume your 25-hour interval. Now, let's talk about doing some more service work. Like putting your new knife in or a spare knife or the one that you want to rebuild. You got to take this one out first. So whenever you want to disassemble this, you're going to loosen up your pitman arm, of course, on the knife head, and then take that grease zerk out. So you're not fighting that vacuum to get the pin out. There's no bolt, there's no nut holding that all together like the old days. You don't need a hammer and a punch to get it out. Put your hammer and a punch back in the toolbox. Take the grease zerk out. Grab you a flat screwdriver. There's a flat slot machined into that pin where you can turn it a quarter a turn. The pin comes up, you can put your channel locks on it, and you can pull the pin out by hand. Then after you replace your knife, let's talk a little bit about getting the knife out too. You do not need a four-wheeler or pickup to pull our knife out. One guy, 2 guys can pull the knife out, one pulling on the knife, and then another fella out here with a screwdriver to keep the knife sections or the knife hardware from catching on the guards or the section bolts. You should be able to pull it out by hand. Now that you're ready to put it back in, go ahead and put it back in. We're going to follow that same procedure I told you a while ago. Once you get it back in, the grease zerk's still out of the pin. Put the pin back in, tighten up the pitman arm, and put the grease zerk back in after you've got it assembled. Then put your manual grease gun on it after you tap that knife head up. Give her a pump or 2, and when you see the knife head move down, stop and resume your 25-hour interval. Very nice. That's why it works. That's why it never breaks. Okay, any questions about that? Another new feature that we have on the FD2. Will you give it back?
No.
Okay. He's honest. Got an 8-inch wider head now. If you want to narrow it up for going down the road or for storage in your barn at the wintertime, take your Set It Right multi-tool and unlock this latch. It even has a decal on it, shows you which way to turn it to unlock it. Ta-da! We have optional storage brackets if you want to keep them on the header. The optional storage brackets go on the back side of the header, or you can just lay them on the belts. Don't throw them on the belts and put a hole in them unless you like buying belts. Handy little feature. Now I'm about to talk about the knife, but I have some things with me that are, they're not parts, they're props. And they're over here on the table. So let's go look at my props or my parts. I love talking about this new knife. I love talking about the new header, but I love talking about this new knife because it is bad to the bone. We've worked on this header for probably a decade. We've worked on this new cutting system for a decade. You don't come with a new cutting system after a year or two of trying ideas. You got to test it. And we tested it all over the planet, lots of different crops, and it is bad to the bone. Let me tell you the new stuff that you're going to like. And I know you're going to like it because those are the things that you guys have complained about. And that's another thing that I really appreciate, and it's why I encourage so much participation in our clinics. This is your header, guys. I've been doing these clinics all these years, and you guys have complained about this or told me you didn't like doing that. Well, you make me look really smart because I tell the guys up at Winnipeg, and they take note of it and they make changes. And that is the result of this header. This is everything we've learned in Draper technology since the 1980s. A little history lesson about the Draper headers on combines. We first took a Draper head off a windrower back in the mid-80s. I wasn't there, but the first cousin of the MacDonald brothers was there, Gene Frazier. He's retired now, and I miss Gene. He's a good old dude. But when we first took a Draper head off a windrower and put it on a combine, I heard a story that he was laying on his belly on the cab of the combine with a video camera. And there was a fella holding his belt so he didn't fall in the header as they were harvesting. And Gene said within about 10 minutes we knew we had something. And we've been perfecting it ever since. And with your help, this FD2 is just like this knife. You're going to like everything about it. I'm getting lots and lots of compliments. So some of the ones that, some of the compliments or complaints I've gotten in or suggestions that I've gotten in the past is, I don't like driving my section bolts up into my knife because I got to use a hammer and they're splined and they're knurled. And it's a pain in the butt and I'm out in the field and it's 95 in the shade. Guess what? No more knurled section bolts. They are oval in shape, very similar to a carriage bolt. So when you take the nut off, bolt's coming out. So get ready to catch it so it doesn't fall down in the weeds and, excuse me, you don't have any weeds in your field, down in the no-till chaff. There we go. That's what I meant to say. So no more driving section bolts up in the header. Another complaint I've gotten over the years. I got to take my guards off to change my sections. No more.
Will this retrofit onto the 140 then?
Thank you for asking. No. In all seriousness, let me have the opportunity to explain why. The opportunity to explain why is this. Two things. What model do you have, sir?
I think it's a 140.
FD1. Your FD1 is standard. The FD2 is metric, not only with the header portion, but the float module, because there's parts of the world where you cannot buy a standard wrench anywhere in the country. That's one reason. Plus, the other big reason is this new knife is doing so much more work. And I don't think your knife drive is going to handle it, is the other reason. But somebody's going to try. I'm surprised I haven't met him yet at Louisville, but somebody's going to try. So here's the reason why. Here's the knife section that you run on your FD1. Here's the knife section that you run on the FD2. See how much longer it is? And all of you know this, but there might be one fella who doesn't yet. The guard is actually what's doing the cutting, not the section. Look how much longer the guards are. And more importantly, look at the length of the slot that the knife section goes through to do the cutting. See how much longer that is. So we got all this extra length, all this extra work that this knife's doing, plus we've changed the profile of the guard. So we have more cutting surface area, even in addition to it being longer compared to the profile of the old guard. Another huge improvement. I've had this complaint once or 1,000 times. I can't adjust my old hold downs on my old header if I have a rock retarder on my header because I can't get a socket on that bolt because I got the rock retarder on it. If you have one of those headers, I suggest you take that hardware out of your old hold down and throw them in the trash. But before you do that, make sure the hardware store has a star-headed bolt with a shoulder on it that you can replace them with, or Jan may be able to get them for you. So you can put a socket on a star-headed bolt to adjust the old hold downs. New hold downs. Basically, thick sheet metal. Spring steel is what I call it because they spring. And that's part of the shape of them. They spring and push the section down so that it's tight up against the guard to do the cutting. Your hold downs are the same thing as a center nut on a pair of scissors. Keep them tight. If your center nut on your pair of scissors is loose, it's not going to cut a piece of paper, let alone a soybean stem. For you fellas that have the old hold downs, I'll show you that when we get around the front side. I'll give you some pointers on how to adjust these and make it as painless as possible because these are high maintenance. I'll admit it. The new hold down, the new cast hold down, low maintenance. And I know you guys love low maintenance because you like listening to Johnny Cash and Patsy Cline and you like the air conditioning in the cab. Because I do too. Let me give you an idea how low maintenance these are. And I'm not suggesting this is the proper interval, but let me just tell you what I saw in the field when they gave me a head one year and they said go demo it. So I was putting that header in all kinds of crazy, nasty, terrible, the worst conditions I could find. And at the end of the year, I had probably 1,500 acres on that header. And I bet I didn't adjust 5 or 6 of these all year. If I'd have done that with these hold downs, I would have had an 1/8 inch gap between the hold down and the knife section. And an 1/8 inch gap is huge, especially when I tell you to set the gap on the hold down to the knife section at 25 thousandths. A couple other advantages. Hollow knife sections. Here's a participation part of the class that might earn you a hat. What's the advantage of a hollow section compared to the old solid section that we run on the prior model headers?
Grabbing dirt.
Dirt, not the answer I want. What was the other one?
If they break off.
If they break, they break off. Sort of the answer I'm looking for. You might get a hat. Huh? Cooling. Incorrect. I very much appreciate the participation. Make sure you all get a hat. Who's got the hat box? I had to be trained on this one. I didn't know it. But I found out it was true the first field I put it in Ohio. Got a lot of rocks in Ohio. A hollow section will bend more, deflect more before it breaks. First field we were in, the guy said, I'm breaking fewer sections. And I'm picking up fewer rocks than I ever have before. Now, picking up fewer rocks has nothing to do with the knife, but you heard me talk about the 8-inch deeper side draper belt and the flatter guard angle. That's part of why. Plus the improvements in the automatic header height control that I'll talk about later. Anybody got any questions about the new knife? New knife drive. When you check your fluid level in your wobble box, it's 85, 140. You want the header up off the ground. You want the top of your wobble box level. I forgot to mention that. Any questions? Okay, bring your chairs. Let's go around the front of the head. Okay, here's my best advice that I have for you fellas that have the old knife. Make sure you set the clearance on these at the beginning of the year and check them every day. And I know you're looking at me like I got 3 heads because I'm telling you to check something every day. The reason I'm telling you to check these every day is because I'm like you. I want to be out here for 10 or 15 minutes adjusting a dozen of them. I don't want to be out here for an hour adjusting all of them. If you check them every day, you're just adjusting a few. If you wait a week to adjust these, you're going to be out here for an hour. Well, where do I set them? Bruce. I lost my steel strap that was on a skid or a pallet that I had painted a nice bright color, so when I throw it in the toolbox I don't lose it. So I went to Napa and I got me a feeler gauge. Yeah, that thing. So I got me a feeler gauge, and I'm going to tell you guys to set them at 25 thousandths between the hold down. And what that's going to do for you is it's going to keep your ground speed up. It's going to keep your cut quality as good as it can be, and it's going to keep your shatter loss as low as it can be when you're in those really dry late season beans. Now, got a little story to share with you. We talked about breaking the knife if you overgrease the knife head pin. Has anybody else here ever broken a knife in a MacDon header? Maybe here or down there. Was it from hitting something? Okay, has anybody here ever broken a knife that didn't hit something? It just broke. And it's because of cheap Chinese steel, right? No, that's not why it broke most likely. Let me just give you an example. I had a customer near home, Decker Chapel, Indiana, south of Vincennes. The dealer called me up, said, hey, Jamie has broken his knife twice. Can you go down and check and see what's going on? Jamie was a new FD2 40 owner. He's a big farmer, cuts a lot of beans. And he was into his second season. And down around Vincennes, I think a lot of you know, we got this thing down there called the Wabash River and the White River. And we call it the neck, down in the neck where the White and the Wabash meet. Well, a lot of flood ground, a lot of sandy soil, very abrasive conditions. So I had a pretty good idea what might have been going on, but I went down and I said, I'll go to the field, truck stop, got me a Mountain Dew, and then I went over to the coffee station and I got me a tool, free, at the Marathon truck stop in Decker, Indiana. And here it is, and you can have them too. Come on, guys, lighten up. So when I got to the field, I said, hey, Jamie, what's going on? I keep breaking my knife. I said, okay. So I came out here and I checked my hold down. I checked this one. Doesn't matter which one. Heck, I can go down there and pick one out. I checked my hold down here. Made sure it was right. Went to the one next to it. Checked that hold down. Made sure it was right. And then I put my straw between the 2 hold downs that I just checked and set. And I put them in the knife. And I said, Jamie, Gary, would you mind grabbing that flywheel and rotating that flywheel? Make sure everybody's clear of the knife before you do. Grab that flywheel and rotate it. I don't care. What do you think happened to Jamie's straw? Bent and pulled it through. His guards were shot. I said, that's why you're breaking your knife. Go get a new set of guards. Okay, I'll have them on tomorrow. I thought they was getting kind of worn anyway. Well, that just proves why. You can do this at the beginning of the year. I highly recommend doing it at the beginning of the year and a couple times throughout the year. And there's your free tool, sir. Yes, yes. Don't, you're shedding a tear.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's all right. Any questions about knife maintenance? It's important. Okay, let's move on. Next topic. Here's another one that's in your book. Side draper deck height. Is anybody familiar with that? Has anybody here ever adjusted your side draper deck? If you have, shake your head, please.
You're saying those guards only lasted him a year?
No, he was into his second season, and he's got a lot of bottom ground, sandy soil. I forget how many acres he got out of them. I have no doubt in my mind he has at least 2,000 acres of soybeans, probably more. So yeah, he got a fair amount of acres out of them. They're double heat treated like the old ones. Unless you guys tell me our guards don't hold up, I'm going to keep telling everybody our guards hold up. Do our guards hold up? Are you guys getting the wear out of them you expect, or are you having to change them 3 times a year? If you're changing them 3 times a year, you ain't getting them from us. If you change them twice a year, you're not getting them from us. Okay, I need to hear stuff.
Change them when they break.
Change them when they break. Attaboy, give him a hat. Yeah. No, first stuff you don't like about our head, you got to tell me. Because if I don't know something's not right, I can't fix it. I've been saying that for decades. Okay, side draper deck height. The reason you need to check this every year is because your side draper belt is a wear item. The reason you need to check it every year is, you see that lip that's on the back side of the belt? You have that same lip up here inside the cutter bar. And that gets a little thinner every year because you're putting acres on it. So as that side draper belt gets a little thinner, you need to check it every year to make sure you don't get trash, leaves, stems, shucks, grass inside your draper belts. Because if that stuff gets in there, it gets conveyed down here, and then it wraps around this idler roller, and then your pulley shot combine operator says, well, I wonder why that crop stopped moving. And then the drive roller keeps turning. And then guess what? You got a hole burnt in the belt. Quit laughing at me. I'm Polak. I can't help myself. It's blaming it on my heritage. I never screw up. Anytime I make a mistake, it's my heritage. I can never take fault for anything. So, since that lip on that belt's getting thinner, we need to check it every year to make sure we keep a good seal. Now, can anybody tell me why we have a lip on the back side of the belt? There's no dirt, trash, leaves, and stems up there.
Run over there?
No, not exactly. You're close. You get a hat anyway. Huh? Flip it. After I wear out the front of this belt, I can take it apart with my connection slats and I can roll her out that way. I can flip it 180 and I can put it back in. And that's why I asked my friend, I have friends, I got 2. I asked Doug back home, he's got a lot of that bottom sandy ground too. He's got 2162. I said, how long have your side draper belts lasted? Have you flipped them yet? He said, you know, I got all that sandy, so I probably got 5,000 acres on those belts, and I'm about to the point where I need to flip them. So I know he got 10,000 acres out of a set of side draper belts. Is that long enough? That's what I thought. I brag on that because nobody else can give you that. That double lip side draper belt is patented by us. So my point is, don't buy non-OEM parts. Get them from us so you're getting the best for your buck. So to check that side draper deck, all you need to do is grab the cleats or the side drapers, the cleats or the slats on your side drapers. And just go down through here. Go all the way down to the center section. And all I'm doing is picking up on them. I'm checking for slop. The book says, I think, a 1/16 of an inch gap. You don't want them hitting because that will wear them out quicker and put extra load on that hydraulic knife drive. So I want a little bit of a gap there. So if you've got several years on your header and you've never adjusted your side draper deck, you're likely going to need to raise that up. Since I'm doing it pre-season and I'm in my nice shop out of the rain and out of the sun, I'm probably just going to I'm definitely going to loosen up the side draper belts like I showed you kick that roller in to take the tension off, and then take your connection slat and disassemble it and just open up the whole belt. But since I'm doing it here, I'm just going to open up part of it so you can see what's in the book that I gave you with your Draper Clinic handouts. After you loosen up your belt and kick that roller in, use a set of channel locks to assist your hand. If you use channel locks by themselves, it's likely that you're going to damage the belt. So when I'm using these to assist me, I'm going to use them on the front, and I'm going to use my hand to pick up in the center of the belt, which helps pull it up and out. Okay? Once you get it started, you can do one of those. Oh boy. What's this thing on here? Oh, it's a flashlight. There's your side draper deck. Don't be hesitant, come in here. It runs the full width of the wing. The new ones are tube steel. The FD1 and prior is thin sheet metal. These are going to last a lot longer. You're also going to see right here in the front. Thanks for the flashlight. Ooh, it's got a magnet on it. Look right there. See that J hook? It's a support hook. You can barely see it. Once again, these pictures are in your book. Right there it is. It's a cast J hook. It's on the front of your side draper deck. And once again, these pictures are in the catalog or the Draper Clinic handout. This J hook has got 2 bolts in it. We've already determined we need to adjust it. Just take those 2 bolts and just crack them loose. You don't want them too loose, just crack them loose. And you're likely going to need to raise the deck. So get a hammer and a punch and hit the J hook. Here's my J hook. Here's my deck. Since it is slotted, when I smack that J hook, that deck is going to go, it's going to slide up. Then you can check your work. Here's another tool I picked up. It's a shipping bracket off of one of our headers. And I call this a go, no-go gauge. And it'll keep me from having to put the belt in each and every time I check a J hook. Because there's about 6 of them down through here. Holds that whole deck up. This way, after I make an adjustment, I take my piece of scrap steel or a key stock or an Allen wrench, and ideally, what thickness should we have this? 1/16 of an inch thicker than the belt. Then after I make my adjustment, I lay it on the deck. I slide it into the cutter bar, just like my belt. If it hits the edge of the cutter bar, what did I do? Say it. Too much. Raise it up too high. You don't want that. You'll wear this belt out twice as quick and it'll have a worse seal than when you started. Plus the extra load on your hydraulic system. Or if I slide it in the cutter bar and I act like I'm a teeter-totter and I push down on the back of it and she's moving up and down because I got a lot of slop in it, I need to go farther. Hit the J hook again. When you get it set, tighten your 2 bolts up and tighten them a little bit at each time because there's 2 of them and the old decks were sheet metal. If you put the torque on one of those bolts, you're going to take this deck and you're going to make it go, you're going to mess up your adjustment. And after you tighten the bolts, what are you going to do? Check it again. Be patient, don't get in a hurry. Some of them you got to find a happy medium. For example, right here at the hinge point. You got two J hooks about that far from each other. You got to find a happy medium there. Don't get in a hurry. Any questions on that? Do that every year before you start. Okay. Let's talk about feeding, auger, feed auger, all kinds of good stuff. This is in-cab Draper speed control. It was an option on FD1 headers, and it is standard equipment on the FD2. Have on the FD1s as an option is standard on FD2s. What do you normally do if you plug your head? What do you do with the crop that's out of here on the wings? Well, the first thing you do is say, damn, because you plugged your head, right? So you come out here and grab all the crop and throw it down on the ground. Quit doing that. I understand why you're doing it, but you don't need to anymore, even if you don't have this. This is very nice with in-cab side draper speed control. If you plug the header, plug the feeder house, turn your side draper speed to 0. Reverse the header. And some guys, when they reverse the header, they will pick it up a little bit and they'll drive backwards. So it lays this out in a carpet instead of a pile. And then after they clear the slug, after they've reversed it, put this back on and you will feed the material off the wings and go back to harvesting without ever getting out of the cab and stop listening to Johnny Cash. You fellas that don't have, if you got an FD75, you got the old manual valve, you can stop throwing it on the ground too, but you're gonna have to get out of the cab, climb down the ladder and turn that valve, the manual valve for side draper speed to 0. Okay, any questions about in-cab side draper speed control and integration on the 24 model headers and newer? 40 series, 40, say again, sir?
Does that come with the 24? Is that what you're saying?
No.
It's integrated in the combine.
It's integrated in the combine, which means you go into the combine monitor to change your side draper speed.
40.
Correct. If you have a 40 series, we're integrated on 50 series combines. I'm glad you're asking. We're not integrated in 40. So you, your salesman, should have known that and should have sold you this kit.
We're aware.
Because we've been doing training with salesmen too. They're not immune, but yeah, if you got a 40 series or older, you got to have the kit. 50 series and newer, we're integrated, so good to go. I'm glad we're talking about it because there's confusion out there, and I want to eliminate that. Okay, let's talk about the proper speed for side draper speed. Wow, that's bright. Okay, what are we shooting for proper side draper speed? How do you know if your side draper speed's right? Well, here's what I want you to look at. Watch the crop flow in the very center of the header. If your side drapers are too fast, it'll throw the crop into itself in the center, and it'll want to bunch up and twist up and boil and such in front of the feed auger. Not good. Slow the belts down. If your side drapers are too slow, you may even have a valley here in the center. I'm not talking about out here, back here. Might have a valley in the center. Speed the side drapers up. What we're shooting for is an even mat of material in the center. I even talked to one fella, if you have this happen to you, he had it happen in wheat. He was quizzing me about it. He said that the side draper belt, when the wheat came off the side draper belt, some of it was getting grabbed and going underneath the header right here, coming off of this belt and going underneath. Throwing it on the ground. Incorrect. Too slow. He was running this like on 2 or 3. Speed it up so it shoots it across here. Even mat of material right here. That's proper side draper speed. Once you get it set, you usually don't have to mess with it much unless you have a really wide range of crop volume. Any questions about side draper speed? Split auger finger holders. We've been offering these for 2 or 3 years now. So when you break one of these auger finger holders, you don't have to disassemble the ones that are in there, the spares that are in there to slide over. You can just put this in the place of the old one, put your finger in, make sure your hairpin is in the correct direction so that it's not the wrong way and come out. Then you can go back to harvesting a lot quicker. Let's also talk about the auger finger. The auger finger, every MacDon Flex Draper auger finger has a roll pin in it. What's the purpose of that roll pin that's inside the skin of the auger?
Keep it inside the drum.
Keep it inside the drum, correct. It will keep it in there as long as you do your job and keep these plastic guides in shape. If your plastic guides are shot and worn out, that hole is big enough to let the finger out. And those fingers never go that way, they always go that way. That's why we're sending now, whenever we send auger fingers, we're sending them with the guide. To remind you, if I'm putting a new finger in, I need to put the guide in. A running change that we made on the FD1, and it is on it's on some FD1s and it's on all FD2s. We started putting magnets inside the auger to help gather stuff that ain't supposed to be there before it tears stuff up. We have made so many changes to this feed auger over the last decade or 12 years. The feed augers are very, very, very durable now. They got harder steel for the skin, not thicker, harder steel. The tine shaft inside that feed auger is 25% bigger than it was on FD75s and prior. 1.25 inch diameter instead of 1 inch. The reversing clutch inside the feed auger has been redesigned to eliminate extra moving parts that were too many in number and would easily fail and create other problems. But there's still stuff you got to do. We're doing as best as we can. Here's the stuff I want you guys to do. I want you checking your flighting clearance between the flighting and the feed pan underneath the auger. You have to do that with the header on the combine. And you take your cut-bar tilt cylinder and you fully extend it. And that is the point that that flighting is going to be closest to that feed pan. And when I climb up here, I make sure my reel is latched for safety, and I check the flighting clearance about 1/2 inch, about a finger width clearance. You can adjust it on both sides, and since I've got my cut-bar tilt cylinder on D, if you need to adjust it after you loosen up your jam nuts, get a socket in every extension you own so you can reach down in between the header frame and the float module frame to make that adjustment to raise and lower the auger. Inspect your fingers often. Just because it's feeding doesn't mean you don't need to look at the auger. Check your auger fingers. If you got a bent one, replace it immediately. Bent fingers are just looking for something to tear up. Make sure your guides are in shape. We already talked about the clearance between the flighting and the feed pan. Also, what's another thing you're going to check on the auger? I gave you 3 or 4. It's your turn to give me one.
Zerks.
Yeah, not the one I want, but yeah, need to grease it. Well, actually, FD75s and later are sealed bearings in the ends of the auger. FD70s, 2162s had grease zerks in the ends of the auger. You got to grease those. Important, but not the one I'm looking for. You're probably referring to the float arm grease zerks. We have a floating auger on our header, which is great. Because what do you do when you're harvesting stuff? You pick up things like rocks or a dead deer, or one guy even picked up a skunk. Man, that was a fun trip. That combine stunk the rest of the year. You gotta grease those floating arms for the auger. But there's still one more you need to check. It's the only thing that's mechanically driven on the header. Check your chain tension. I see this too loose too often. When you're running loose chains on our auger, get your checkbooks out because it's only going to be a matter of time before you break something. Here's my best advice to check your chain tension. Come up close, guys, if you would please. The inspection door on the back side of that poly cover chain case is very big on the FD1 and the FD2s to make it easier for you to inspect your chains and sprockets also.
Is that easier to do with it on the combine or off the combine?
Checking the inspection, taking the door off the combine. If you want to check your, good question. If you want to check your chain and sprockets, do it when it's on the head trailer. The nice thing about those 2 grease zerks for your auger pivot arms on the back side where it pivots, on the FD2 we now have a small 2 lube bank grease zerk. I forgot to show you when I was back there. And you can grease those with it on the combine. Anything else about the feed auger? You guys got any questions about the feed auger? Check your reversing clutch. I mentioned it, but I forgot to tell you how to check it. It's real easy. You do this in the cab too. When your header's in forward operation, the fingers should be coming out the front of the auger. When the header is in reverse, the fingers should be coming out the back of the auger. And then put them back and forward and make sure they're coming out the front.
You talked about belt tension on the sides. What
Yes.
about belt tension on the nose?
I can show you that when we get underneath. Belt tension on the feed draper belt is done underneath, and we have indicators, better indicators. If you tighten, my word of advice to everybody that has a flex draper, if you're going to set that chain tension, make sure you read the book, because it's hold this bolt, turn this bolt, and break this one. It's just, you got to do it step by step. And if you don't do it by the book, you're not going to be tightening it. Just make sure you read it and look at the picture like I do. Real damp straw getting pinched in these corners, causing your side drapers to stall out. Anybody ever had that happen? Yeah, that is one negative thing about these corner fillers. The purpose of the corner fillers is to keep beans from dribbling out the side of the header. But if you get into some grass or some really nasty wet dank straw, it can get pinched in between here and stall your side draper out. If you have that happen often, just take these out. One fella I was riding with up in another state here several years ago, when he went through a grass waterway, he left his header down for whatever reason. I guess he wanted to mow the grass. And that grass got pinched in between here, and we stalled it out, and we had to dig it out. So the next time he went through the grass waterway, he picked the header up. Use a bush hog to mow grass, come on. Okay. Any questions about the feed auger? Keep an eye on it. It's doing a lot of work, guys. Don't not check stuff on the auger. Okay, let's move on to reel operation. Gary, are you going to be around a little bit? I'm going to need your assistance when I get down there. Show them the change, the pitch of the reel tines and stuff. But before we do that, you guys want to take a 5-minute break? Anybody need to go to the restroom? Take 5. It was about the reel, which is great timing because that's the next topic, is the reel. Tons of improvements, as you can see on this reel. New end sheets, more sectors. If this was an FD1, you would only have one sector here. Look how long that tine tube is, which gives it more leverage to get bent. So we've added an additional sector. These are the nicest, smoothest operating end sheets I've ever been around. They do a lot for anti-wrapping. They do a lot for crop retention. Just once again to keep everything moving. And to tell you how good this reel is, I've been hearing complaints from customers about things they didn't like on the prior model headers. Well, that's another one. My reel wraps. What can I do with reel wrapping? So one of the first fields we were in, we tried to get the reel to wrap. Tried our darndest to get the reel to wrap. Tried to get it to wrap throughout that whole season. That year I had one. I was only able to get it to wrap in one field on one farm, and it wrapped a little bit. And it was because he had his guidance rows set up where he was running with the row instead of cutting at a little bit of an angle. So all day and all night, we had a soybean plant here. And at the end of the night, I had a few up in here that I had to pull out by hand, a few. 10 or 12, that's a few in Knox County, Indiana. Not bad at all. Even in the double crop soybeans, the reason I point those out is because guys have to run the reel too low to get all that straw off the cutter bar, which makes it more likely to wrap. It did not wrap. So some of the things that we have done, you can do to your header. One of them is look at your right hand reel. And right here on your right hand reel, you will have a steel finger. Take them off and throw them in the trash and put a plastic one here, either a straight or a bent one. It makes no difference. Another thing that you can do with your header to keep it from wrapping is notice the orientation of the steel finger that remains in orientation with the plastic fingers. They're virtually in line with each other. If you have an FD1 or prior model header, your steel finger is like this. It is leading and is more aggressive and is more prone to wrap. Bend it until it is in line with the plastic ones. And I even have some customers who have put duct tape or electrical tape around these coils on this spring, because that's usually where it gets started. That coil will grab a soybean stem and start to wrap. So that'll keep it from grabbing the first one and grabbing additional ones. Another thing that we've done with the FD2 is we've added these deflectors here to keep crap from getting mashed in here and pinched and start to wrap. They also deflect when they're hitting, when these deflectors are hitting the crop. If you get into some late season, 7% moisture, these deflectors are deflecting the soybeans this way, so they fall on the header and not down on the ground. Lots of nice things that we've done on the reel. Another big one. Who here has ever tightened their reel drive chain? It's a pain. How long did it take you to do?
45 minutes.
45 minutes. How many cuss words? How many tossed wrenches? Yeah. If you want to see how to do it, I will show you afterwards, but this cover comes off with no tools. There's a spring-loaded clip there, and then there is a cam that has notches, and then there is a tooth that goes in those notches. I release that tooth that goes in those notches. I reach up there with my tool, this way, and I pull down and I go click, click, and it's done. Put the cover on, go back to harvesting instead of 45 minutes later. Yeah, huge, huge improvement. Now let's talk about some basics on the reel. How do you run a reel on a Draper head? You know this, but it's my job to remind you: up, out, and slow. When I'm setting my reel height, I'm comparing my soybean. This is now a soybean. I'm comparing the soybean to the lower tine on the reel, tine tube. And as this reel is coming around, all I need this tine tube to do is hit the top of that bean and make it fall back on the belt because it's already been cut by the knife. Okay, so up. The more down you run the reel, the more it's going to wrap and the more it's going to carry cut crop over the top. Out. On an FD2, our indicator is down on the left-hand side of the header now, and it also has a sensor on it on the FD2, so you can use a return to feature that the combines have had for years that we haven't been able to use because we didn't have a sensor. So for example, if you get in part of the field where you have to run your reel all the way out because you have a small patch of down crop, you can reach out there, pick it up, and then when you get back in the good stuff, in your 40 series combine, sir, you can hit resume and that reel will go back to the fore and aft position that you programmed into it at the beginning of the year. We also have a sensor that we carried over from the FD1 onto the FD2, and it is a reel height sensor for the exact same reason. You're going to drop the reel all the way down to pick up down crop. When you get back in the good standing crop and you hit resume, it's going to go back to the fore and aft and height that you programmed into it at the beginning of the year. And I think you can have 1 or 2 settings on that. So nice features on the FD2 that we haven't had in the past. Reel, let me show you where to set your fore and aft. I talked about out. If you got an FD2, your indicator's down here on the left-hand side now, you're gonna put it on 5 or 6. If you own an FD1 or prior, that indicator's down here now. Let's come down here and I'll show you where to take that reading. Auto headers, when you're sitting in the cab, look in between the reel end sheet and the cam to take your reading, and you're gonna start there on number 5 or 6. And when you're in that position, the center place of the reel is gonna be on top of or slightly in front of the cutter bar. That's good. So up, out, and now slow. The best way I've ever heard it described for reel speed is this. Set your reel speed so it looks like it's pulling the combine. Just a little bit faster than your ground speed. So that's a normal, good standing crop. Now we're going to get into some adverse conditions. And Gary, this is where I'm going to need your help. If you would please, let's just drop the reel all the way down. You might bump it up because I've got the belt out of the cutter bar. Maybe just bump it up and then kill it and then stay in the cab. Watch the reel fingers down here to watch where they drop the crop after on the back side of the cutter bar. As I rotate the reel, it's in a normal position. We're in good normal standing crop. Clear the reel. It's delivering the crop to the cutter bar, cutting it off, gets it a little bit behind the cutter bar, and the reel fingers are basically dumping the crop on the belts. Perfect. That's the way it's supposed to be. Now, we get into some of that down crop that we were talking about, and I'm not talking a little patch here or a little patch there. If you've got a half a field, if you've got 40 or 50 acres that's laying down on the ground, where are you going to be running your reel to pick that stuff up? All the way out. And all the way down, most likely. And this is a true pickup reel. It will actually physically pick the crop up off the ground to present it to the knife. Another huge advantage to the MacDon. So it will drop so low that sometimes if your cutter bar tilt is really steep, you'll see the reel doing this. You know what that means? Your reel fingers are hitting the dirt. Bump the reel up until it stops. Gary, if you don't mind, slide the reel all the way out like we're picking up some down crop. Watch the reel fingers and where they're dropping the crop. Where's it dropping the crop now? Right on the cutter bar. What just happened to your ground speed? Went from 3.5 to 1. What just happened to your header loss? It went from 1/2 bushel to at least 5. What happened to the wear and tear in your guards? What happened to your patience level? Change the pitch of your reel tines if you're in a position where you have a large amount of acres you're going to be cutting with the reel like this. We have this on every flex draper we've ever built. 3/4 inch wrench on the older headers. Set it right multi-tool on the FD2. We're going to unlock this spring-loaded pin. This is the reel cam, which controls the motion of the reel fingers. It has 4 numbered slots. It is in the number 2 slot, which is where it came from the factory, which is very good for lots of conditions, lots of harvesting. But now that we're running this reel all the way out and we need to move the crop back farther, the bigger the number, the farther back it brings the crop. The bigger the number, the more aggressive the reel is. So we were in 2. I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. What position do you think we need to move the cam to? Huh?
Go all the way to 4.
Go all the way to 4. No need to mess with 3. Give that man a hat. Right, reel's all the way out. Let's move the cam. We use our tool and we can rotate the cam like so. Get it to number 4. It's a spring-loaded pin. When I lock it, it's either going to pop into place or not. If it doesn't pop into place, you can just bump this cam and that pin will pop into place. Now we're in the number 4 setting. Now watch the reel fingers and what they're doing with your crop after they go past the cutter bar. Clear the reel. There you go. Just what you paid for. Keep your ground speed up, keep your head loss down. Any questions on the MacDon reel? How to operate it? Let's talk about some new options we have with the FD2 header. We are offering the FD2 header in an FD225, an FD230, an FD235 with single knife drive, which we've always had, and an FD235 with double knife drive. That is new to the offering. If you want it, we're happy to sell it to you, but for our crop in this part of the world, I don't think you need double knife drive on a 35-foot header. We also have an FD240, single knife drive, and a double reel. We also have an FD240 with a double knife drive and a triple reel. The triple reel matches the frame of the header. So your reel lift arms are at the hinge of the frame. And that is for guys that have a couple of conditions. Number 1, it's mainly for guys who have hills. Because the next new feature, we've talked about 20% more capacity. We got 30% better cutting speed with the new cutting system. Now the third big thing we're promoting on the FD2 is 70% more flex. So to utilize that 70% more flex and still be able to get the reel all the way down on that cutter bar in those down crop situations, if you have hills, I highly recommend that you buy the triple reel on a 40-footer with double knife drive. So you can get that thing down, that reel right on the cutter bar if you got hills. If you're gently rolling around flatlander like we have around these parts, a 40-footer with a double reel is just fine. But you're not going to be able to utilize all that extra flex unless you adjust your reel up a little bit so we don't do this other thing that we're famous for and cut reel fingers off. We don't want to do that. When you get a triple reel, you will have aluminum tying tubes. Double reels have the steel tying tubes. 45s, 50s, 61 footers, they're all triple reel, double knife drive. If you're a customer, and also a word of, I wish the other fellows wouldn't have left yet, so whoever is their salesman, you might want to pass this along to them. It's a word of warning because this reel is so tough and always has been for the first 15, 20 years we've been in this business. These steel tying tubes are stronger. And guys have used these steel tying tubes to clear big piles of wet, heavy stuff off the cutter bar. If you do that with a triple reel header that has aluminum tying tubes, you may have trouble. That's a word of, it's fair warning. They've been using it to clean off the cutter bar. We don't recommend it, we don't suggest it, but I've seen some of these break when guys use it for something it's not designed to do. Or if they still want to clean it off with the reel, that's fine with me. But buy a double reel with the steel tying tubes is my suggestion. We can only do so much in our design of these new end sheets or even the old end sheets. If you hit a tree limb, they will bend. I don't know how to get them not to besides trimming the trees. We can only do so much. Another thing in down cropped you're going to want to do to help you keep up your ground speed, take the white dividers off. in down crop. That way we get very aggressive dividing the crop with the steel cones. And there are storage brackets for these under this shield. And the prior model headers, those storage brackets are back here so you can keep them with the header and put them back on when you get in the good stuff. Ran into an organic farmer in another state a few years ago, and the salesman sent me a picture of a MacDon Draper head in that organic field, and the end of the reel was full of grass, horseweeds, pigweed, some hybrid that's not killable kind of weed, whatever they call that. And I'm like, holy cow, I've never seen that before. So I kept looking at the picture, and I noticed these were off. And I'm like, my goodness, I don't know what to tell the guy. I've never seen that before on our header. I said, well, just put those back on and see what happens. He put those back on and it didn't wrap anymore.
Cuts it off.
Yeah, pushes down, cuts it off, helps separate it, helps get it away from here.
Cucumber works better that way too.
Burr cucumber. Okay. That's that nasty viney stuff, right? You're cutting it here and you see the crop moving over there 20 yards.
It's better just to cut it off and take what you got.
Yeah. Yep. Any questions about the reel? She's a good one. Okay, let's move around the backside. Start talking about some stuff like automatic header height control, and is new and is great and is awesome, and technicians love it, and customers who like to adjust their float and wing balance love it too. Let me just say it this way. We as a manufacturer have done not a perfect job of giving technicians and farmers the tools they need to properly set their float and their wing balance. At the beginning, we didn't have any tools, basically just a rod. And we would adjust headers based on the feel or whether a washer was loose or tight, and it was okay. Then we went to the FD75 and we started shipping the headers with an old school looking torque wrench that may be mounted on the back of your header here that would help technicians and farmers get the float and the wing balance close. So then we were like horseshoes and hand grenades, and we would teach technicians, get it close and go to the field. And then dial it in there based on what you see on the ground. Let the stubble tell you how to adjust the header. But now that we've gotten with the FD1 header, we realized that we needed to do better, and now we have. And I can report to you that when you get this header, the float is going to be exact and the wing is going to be exact. We're no more horseshoes and hand grenades. We've got laser guided missiles. Let me show you. Couple things we got on here. If you don't mind, come in close. This indicator will be pointing at a number when we pre-float the springs. This is also a big deal because before we were checking the springs when the header was like this, when it's off the ground. Well, you're not cutting off the ground unless you're cutting wheat. And who cares what the flex and float's doing there, right? When you're down on the ground cutting soybeans, it needs to be precise. So now we are not only giving you, they're not going to be. Because I got a wobble box down there. I don't have a wobble box down here, etc. Pardon?
Double drive you would.
Yes, double drive you would, but never measure the threads on the left side and compare them to the right side. Never do that, is my advice. Now you want the threads on these two to be the same so these springs are working together. But the point is, we're preloading the springs now. So it's more accurate, plus we're giving you a precise indicator. And the other thing we're giving you is a decal, or excuse me, a decal. There are no words on this decal. It tells you exactly what you have to do to set float and wing balance. Step 1, cutter bar tilt is on D, reel is all the way down, reel fore and aft is on number 6, cutter bar is 10 inches off the ground. Perfect. Step 2, make sure I'm level. Same thing if you've got an older head. When Gary and the guys set your float and wing balance on your old header, they had the header level. You may have been shelling corn for 3 or 4 weeks, and you've been using your lateral tilt, And then also make sure that the PSI in your tracks is the same. Finally, a joke. It's just a base point. Let's make sure we're level when we're going to cut soybeans. That's where they adjusted it. And since we're checking float, on my float setting, I want my wings locked. Is what it tells me on the decal. I have them unlocked here, and there's a decal on the shields that we've removed. And then unlock the float. And then I grab my Set It Right multi-tool wherever I left it, and I preload these springs on both sides. So I'm lifting the header up. And when it's lifted up, I'm going to set this indicator so it's on number 2. And that's it. And then I go to the other side and I do the same thing. I make sure my indicator is pointing at the small number 2. And if I make an adjustment to these springs, it also tells me on here to wiggle the header. Just go out here and grab the header and just kind of pick up on it a few inches and let it settle, let it rest where it needs to. So we're taking out any errors that might be caused from friction. And after we do that, we want it set on number 2, and when it's set on number 2, your float is set. And you go to the other side and do the same thing. Perfect. Then after your float is set, and this is true with any flex draper, float has to be right first before you adjust wings. If your float's not right, it doesn't matter what you do to the wings, they're not going to work properly. So these steps are numbered for a reason. Step 1's float, step 2 is your wing balance. So we go to the wing balance, what are we doing here? Same thing, we've got step 1, put the reel all the way down. Reel fore and aft on 6. Cut a bar 10 inches off the ground. Cut a bar tilts on D. That's step 1. Step 2, make sure I'm level. I'm checking wings now, so I'm going to lock my float. Lock my float. Then leave the opposite wing locked and unlock the wing that you're working on. And then you grab your Set It Right multi-tool and you hook up this little cable. After you hook up this little cable, then you take your Set It Right multi-tool and see these 2 indicators on here, these black indicators, how they're movable, adjustable. I'm going to squeeze them together. I take my Set It Right multi-tool, if you don't mind. Thank you kindly. But now I'm going to let you tell me what I need to do by reading the decal. I'm going to show you how easy it is to read the decal. Do you mind, sir? You got a Purdue hat on. You must be smart. So now I've got my cable hooked up.
Okay.
And I have squeezed my indicators together. I'm pretty sure I did. Yep.
You're gonna.
Then I take my yellow thing. That's the tool.
Yep.
And I'm going to do what with it? I'm going to go up. All the way up.
All the way down.
All the way down. How many times?
2 times.
Twice. And then I take my reading. The point remains. After you do that, you don't have to have an operator's manual. You may forget this when you go to the field a month from now and you want to check wing balance on your FD2. We've got a video on YouTube and on the MacDon.com YouTube channel or on the MacDon.com public website. And you can watch this video and it'll tell you exactly what I did. And these are precise and exact. You want the number to be the same when you go up and down. And that is when your wing is balanced, and that's when it's going to stay down on the ground and get all the beans and not float up and porpoise and leave too much stubble out there with pods, and it's not going to bulldoze because it's too heavy.
Is there a situation where something would cause the head to be like go to like 2.5 and 1, say, on your indicators? Or what does that mean that needs to be adjusted on the head if that does happen? That's
a very good question. It will never move in that great of a number. It may move slightly, like half a number, and it basically tells you what to do to get it right in the next picture.
Oh, okay.
So if my indicator, if my two indicators look like that, I want to get my 24 millimeter wrench, and I am going to pull this keeper back. It's a spring-loaded keeper that keeps it from coming out of adjustment.
Okay.
And I'm going to turn it to move that rod. Which way?
You're gonna screw the thing that way.
Yes. So I'm going to turn this counterclockwise. This is the same thing as a nut on a bolt. When I turn my bolt counterclockwise, the nut's coming off. And that's going to move it in, and he knew that because of the decal that has no words on it. And then the opposite direction, if I have that on my two indicators,
the other way.
then you turn it the other way to move that rod out. Until, and you're going to do that until you get what?
Till it balances.
The same. 2.5, 2.5, 3.5, 3.5. I don't care what the number is as long as it's the same going up as going down. Now your wing balance is set. I had hoped that we were going to get on the FD2 to where we would not have to readjust them after a new header gets limbered up after 500 acres. That did not happen like I had hoped. So after you get 300 or 400, 500 acres on a brand new header, you're likely going to have to reset the float and the wing balance. And now that we're giving you the indicators and the technicians, the indicators, we've gotten rid of another complaint that I've gotten over the years. And it became common knowledge. If you own a MacDon, it needs to be adjusted right. Well, that, in my opinion, is true with any tool. I don't care whether it's a planter or a disc or a moldboard plow or a bush hog. If it ain't adjusted right, you got a real expensive boat anchor.
You don't care about the frown or the smile or any of that hokey stuff anymore.
Hokey stuff. I like how you describe it. Those are good terms for us to use to help understand what's going on with the header when we're talking on the phone. But yeah, the smile and the frown. When this is balanced, I've set some of them. When I set them balanced, where the number is the same going up and down now, because I've got a laser guided missile instead of a horseshoe. Yeah. I've seen cutter bars when the headers, when your cutter bar's that far off the ground, I've seen the cutter bar straight with that number the same. And then when the header's off the ground and I have that number the same, I've seen the frown.
So it all depends on how it feels on the board.
Yep.
How it works.
And one side can be up and one side can be down, which leads me to another point. It's fairly common amongst us, but just a reminder, because there's some new folks here. I don't care what the header looks like when it's off the ground. It's when it's down on the ground that's cutting that matters. I've had guys ask me, well, when I raise the head, the left wing does this and the right wing does that. What the heck's going on? And I'm like, well, how's it cutting? It's cutting great. Is it pushing and bulldozing? No. Is it leaving any crop in the field? No. Leave it be. Gravity's, 5 pounds of difference in your tire track PSI. Maybe when you parked the header, you were turning just a little bit. Maybe the sign of the moon was a different. Got your almanac. See what I mean? What's down on the ground is where the meat and potatoes are. The point is I'm trying to get rid of, we've kind of gotten rid of the mystery, and now we're giving everybody the tools they need to do to get it just right. Really proud of the job we did. Especially the decal. The decal was a cool deal. I was out in Nebraska, 4 or 5 years ago. And we're out there with MacDon people from all over the United States and Canada. And I'm standing up here and I'm looking at our new decal. Doing one of these. What's all this, And then the product manager comes up. His name is Russ Henderson, pretty good dude, been around a while. He said, Bruce, tell the group how to set float and wing balance on an FD2. And I'm like, Russ, I don't know how. I've never done it before. He said, that's all right. Just read the decal. And I did the same. He did the same thing to me that I did to you to prove the point. It's easy. Easy peasy. Any questions about float and wing balance? You guys want to talk about automatic header height control? I like talking about automatic header height control. You know why I like talking about it so much? Because you do it in the cab when the air conditioner's on. Don't need any wrenches. After you get everything set right, you've done all the stuff in the book that I told you to do. Let's not forget about automatic header height control, the easy stuff. You don't need any tools most of the time. On older headers, we had, on FD1 and prior model headers, we had a pretty good automatic header height control system. But it had its issues and it had its problems. These are the issues and the problems I want you to check when you get home. If you own an FD1 or FD75, FD70, 2162, 974, it doesn't matter. Unlock your float, unlock your wing balance. Take the header and mash it down on the ground. You have that white globe up here that we call the float optimizer. It's got a black indicator pointing at 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And attached to that indicator is a cable. And that cable comes from this float linkage up, goes through the float optimizer, goes through those pulleys, goes over to the other side, drops down to the other float linkage. So we're making sure that all of that is working smoothly and freely. Make sure your cable's not frayed. Make sure it's connected and that indicator's moving. When I mash that header down on the ground with my feeder house with the float and the wing balance unlocked, that indicator should go from 0 to 4 and should come back to 0 when you lift the feeder house up. So we're making sure everything's moving correctly. If it's not moving correctly, you've got something going on. So you need to start investigating. It could be a broken cable. It's one continuous cable. The cable may be broken. We've gotten rid of that on here. It could be a pivot point that is stuck. There's at least 2 or 3 pivot points inside that white float optimizer that's up here. Make sure all of that is moving. It has some very tight tolerances and it can get bean fuzz and such caught inside of it. And if enough of it gets in there, it's not going to allow that indicator to move. And also attached to that indicator is the potentiometer. So that means your automatic header height control is not going to work. And then we've also got these things in there that are called pulleys. And they're about the size and width of a nickel. And they've got a slot cut in the top of them for the cable to go through. And so if you get a lot of dirt on top of that cable, on the top of that pulley, the cable can come off. And now your header control is not working. Guess what? We got rid of all of that. If you find that your pivot point is tight and you can't free it up, you may have to disassemble it. So disassemble it. When you disassemble it, those rods may have a plastic bushing on them. If they have a plastic bushing on them, take them off and throw them in the trash. Then clean off those pins with your wire wheel on your workbench, put some anti-seize on it, and reassemble it back together. You might want to take a picture first to make sure you get the cable routed right. So you don't have to do this for too long. So the point is also keep that float up, keep it blown off. Blow it off with a steel gas-powered blower or an electric blower or an air compressor. Keep the dirt off of it. If you have to leave the header out and you know it's going to rain and you just can't get it to the shed, I even have some guys that keep a garbage bag in their cab with a bungee cord, and they'll cover that float optimizer up so it doesn't get wet, and then the bean fuzz turns as hard as a rock. So there's a lot going on there. You need to do that stuff. Another thing you might run into is with the header off the ground. That black indicator might be pointing at 0.5, or it might be pointing at 0.1. It's not broke, it's just that cable has stretched. And there's a step-by-step that shows you how to take the slop out of that cable to get that indicator back on 0 when the header's off the ground. Pretty simple little thing to do that can help you utilize the best of your automatic header height control. And the point I'm trying to make is there's a lot to do there and keep an eye on. Every bit of it's gone on the FD2. It was less than good. It worked really well for a good 10 or 12 years, but now if you want to see, please come over here and I want to show you our new cable. Flat piece of steel. Mechanical linkage goes down and it hooks to this float bell crank. There's your new cable. Hooks to that bell crank, so as this header's floating and following the ground, that mechanical link is attached to my indicator. And on the back side, is a Hall effect sensor. There's no moving parts in a Hall sensor. No more potentiometers. These are better because of no moving parts, and they are more precise. And because they are more precise, they're finicky. So if you talk to Gary and he tells you to make sure your voltage is 0.5 on the left and 0.5 on the right, make sure you set it to 0.5 and not 0.6 and 0.4. They're more finicky, so they need to be exact. So your lateral tilt works better. Lateral tilt is standard equipment on the FD2 so that your field tracker will take over when the header tilts so far. Just like the automatic header height control does up and down. Very nice. Very nice. Now, what are the big numbers for? Two sets of big numbers. How hard you're pressing on the ground. 1000% correct. That is the amount of down pressure that you're putting on the header with the combine's automatic header height control. We are using the combine's header height control for the same thing on an FD2 that we did on an FD70. And it is to keep the feeder house in a sweet spot. So the header is free to flex and float and follow the ground. We don't need electronics. We don't need hydraulics. We don't need computer boards. We don't need hydraulic accumulators. We don't need airbags. We don't need any of that stuff because gravity works pretty good. Header control is assisting the header. It's not controlling the header. So what is the sweet spot? What's the sweet spot for down pressure on our header control to get it to do the best job it can? Any guesses?
1.5.
I like both answers. This gentleman said depends on the dirt. This gentleman said 1.5. Yes, you're going to adjust your header control depending on your conditions, but the sweet spot, the best place where it's going to work most of the time is between 1.5 and 2.5. Can I run this header on 1? Yes. Can I run it on 0? Yes. Can I run it on 4? Yes. All the above, but where she's going to do the best is 1.5 to 2.5. Let me give you some instances where I've seen both. A couple years ago, I was in Ohio. They got a lot of rocks in Ohio. I was out in the field with a guy, helping him, teaching him how to do the float and the wing balance with a few technicians. And he was running his header control presets, his automatic header height control. He had it set on 0. And I'm like, I hadn't seen that before. Why? So I start getting curious. Why are you doing this, sir? And he said, well, see that rock over there? Big rock about the size of a volleyball, had a bunch of them out in the field. He wanted to run it on 0, and there she was. He had already cut over it, not around it, over it. He had to hop right over it, 0. He said, I want it to hop over those rocks. Didn't break no guards, no nothing. Then you get into, I hate to say it, but sometimes we have a drought year in harvest, and you may have some, low potted beans, or guys that raise different crops like they do in Michigan called edible beans. The beans pod off the ground, the beans pod off the ground that far, and the pods are that long. So they want the header down as close to the ground as they can get it, so they might run for if the ground is hard as dirt. So adjust your header control for your conditions, and then let's calibrate it. After we calibrate it, let's make sure it's working. We've got everything freed up like I suggested, make sure everything's working. Now let's calibrate the header control. Float's unlocked, wings are unlocked. After you calibrate it, how do you know if it's working? How do you know if it took the calibration? Do you trust the combine when it says calibration took? I don't. Combines lie. I've seen them. They've done it to me. So there's a way you can check your automatic header height control before you go to the field instead of just heading for the ditch and hope it works. Set the header down on the ground. Leave the header control turned on. You can do this in your lot, in your barn lot. Put the header on a number. I don't care what number, put it on a number. Same thing with your float optimizer. Put it on a number. Now we're going to trick the combine. That lying combine, I'm going to trick it. We're going to trick the combine into thinking it's in the field by taking the cutter bar tilt cylinder and fully extend and retract it. So now the combine thinks we're moving across the field. When you're extending and retracting that cylinder, watch your feeder house. You should see your feeder house moving to compensate. Now you know it's functioning. If it's not moving the feeder house, it could be as simple as a bad potentiometer, or it could be a setting. And the next setting I want to talk about is the sensitivity of the automatic header height control. And it's going to help you in adverse conditions when you get into loose soil or mud that you're sinking up to your ankles in when you get in the combine. Or if you've got some lots of trash because you're no-till or organic and you've got some real sticky stuff because you had a real heavy frost last night. Or if you got hills, you want the header to be exact and reactive, and you want to keep that feeder house in that sweet spot when you're in those tough conditions. That's what sensitivity is for. So after you put the header down on the ground, like I suggested, on a number with the header control turned on, then you're going to go into your sensitivity setting in the combine, and you're going to increase the sensitivity. And you may turn sensitivity all the way up to 10 and nothing happens. That's fine, because we already know it's working. But you may find that you get your sensitivity up to 8 or 9, and it's so sensitive, the feeder house can't find a home. So then what's the feeder house start doing? Hunting. Decrease your sensitivity until it stops hunting, and now your sensitivity is set. So when you get in the mud or the no-till or the nasty conditions, the feeder house is going to be in a sweet spot, even when you're in the hills and such. And I saw that a few years ago when I had that demo header, that demo FD2. The last field, the last difficult condition I put it in, it was probably the most difficult condition that we harvest in. And sometimes, a lot of times, a MacDon header will harvest the gentleman's crop, and other competitors have to go home because they can't harvest. They physically won't harvest it, and it's called double crop soybeans. I got wheat stubble out there. I've got 40 or 50 foot or 45 or 35 foot of chaff and such left over from wheat harvest out in the field. And I'm trying to harvest soybeans that are this tall, and since they're no-till, all the leaves and such are on top of the ground, and they could not have been a more perfect demo to test this FD2 header. It was a very heavy frost that night, and as soon as the frost melted, what'd the farmer do? Bloop, climbed in the cab, started combine, and we headed to the field. And I kid you not, I'm out there with a 10,000 pound header, and we're floating, and we're not pushing a bit. We started in the bottoms where it was flat, made sure we had our sensitivity, cutter bar tilt, all that stuff was set just right, and then it went up in the hills in these conditions, and it never pushed once. And you could literally take the trash that this header was floating on top of, and you could do that with your foot, and it would start bunching and pushing up in front of my foot, but the header never did. That's what you're getting with an FD2. We know harvesting. We know what you want because you guys have been telling us. This thing is a piece of work. Any questions on header control? Let's talk about rocks. You guys got rocks? We already talked about running less down pressure. Other things we can do, other things you can do is run less down pressure. Also run a flatter guard angle. Got A, B, C, D on the older heads. You got A, B, C, D, E on the new head. Run a flatter guard angle. Keep running flat until you're picking up the fewest amount of rocks that you want to see. If you're still picking up too many rocks and you've done everything you can from the cab with your down pressure by running light and your cutter bar tilt by running flat, and you know the float and the wing balance is right because you now have these new indicators that are precise on an FD2, and Gary set it just right for you. There's one last thing that you can do if you're still picking up too many rocks. What do you think that is? Any ideas? Tilt the cutter bar back. We've already done that. What's something you can do after all that stuff in the cab? Something you have to do out here. Pick up rocks? Call my wife and have her pick up the rocks? That's a good answer. This is a little easier. You know, I did learn when I was in Michigan a few weeks ago, they were teaching me how to pick up rocks when they were young. It's amazing. They pick rocks like we pick watermelons and Vincennes. They had a wagon and 3 guys on each side. Yep. Another thing you can do, if you've done everything you can from the cab, another thing you can do as a last resort to keep from picking up too many rocks, drop your skid shoes down one hole. And that will raise your cutter bar up just a little bit. And when I made that suggestion to a customer recently, he had one of our headers and he had a competitor's head. And when I told him to do that with a competitor's head, he said, well, I don't want to do that with your head because then it'll cut like the competitors. He was my new best friend. Got a few things I want to talk about underneath the cab. Kindly follow me, folks. Let's go back around the front side. Flex drapers, you got 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Drop them down a notch. That'll raise your cutter bar height a little bit. Any questions about any of that stuff? Talking to a guy yesterday, he said, I take my outside skid shoes off. I'm not opposed to that. It's fine. It's good to see this. So let me point out, what's right above the outside skid shoe? What's right above it? Like that far away. What?
Belt.
The belt. The belt. If you get into some nasty stuff, sticky stuff, muddy stuff, it's easy for that stuff to get built up on top of these end skid shoes. The end ones are the worst. Keep them clean. Another bit of advice to you. If you are a customer who likes to cut his corners like this, say my corner is up here. If I like to cut corners like this and step on my brake and cut real tight, definitely take the outside ones off. If I turn sharp with a 30, 35, 40, 45, 60 foot header, if I turn sharp, I've got one outside one that's not going forward anymore. It's going backwards, and it makes a real nice scoop. Enough about skid shoes. If you take the outside ones off, take the bracket that holds them too, so it doesn't drag up. Does everybody here know what these are? If you don't, you should. Every flex draper has a breakaway designed into it. This is the breakaway that we have used since the FD75. It's externally mounted, so if you shear one, oftentimes you can replace it and go back to harvesting. But before you do that, you might want to go buy a couple lottery tickets because you just saved your head from getting totaled and you saved your feeder house from getting twisted. So these are worth talking about a little bit. They used to be painted black. Starting with the FD1s and FD2s, they're painted white, so you remember where they're at. So check these at the beginning of the year and throughout the season a few times. And especially for this. We engineered it, we gave you this tool, let's use it. And here's how I want you to use it. If you brush up against something on the end of this header, like the tire on the grain cart, or an electric post, or anything, you are not allowed to stay in the cab and say, I didn't hit it that hard. You have to come out here and look at these. And where these new ones that we started with the FD75s, where they will shear is on the back side. It will shear the hook off. Let me show you where they're located. Come up close, please. Oh, there's 2 on every header. They're bolted right here. Here's your header, guys, that we're bolted to. And here's the hook that she's going through. There's your float arm of your float module. So you have 3 connection points of the header to the float module. There's 1. There's 2. Which one's number 3? Cutter bar tilt cylinder. So yeah, if you shear one of these, you've lost 33% of your connection. Do not try to make it to the end of the field. Stop. You can't check it by standing up there either. You have to get back here and make sure that the hook is up in the slot. Keep one with you. You're also going to want to check your connections. Obviously, call your dealer. Have a good knowledgeable technician help you check other things like the connection points in the front corners of this feed deck. The feed deck is this entire assembly that includes your feed draper belt and all the framework and rollers and everything inside there. Make sure that hasn't come disconnected in the front corners. Okay. Something else about breakaways. Who here owns an FD70 or a 2162? I want you to come up in the front row and look very close because it's totally different. If you own an FD70 or a 2162, you do not have this piece. This piece of steel that it's bolted to is not here. See how this piece of steel wraps around and goes vertical? On your header, you will look here where that goes vertical. And you will have the head of a 15/16 boat looking right at you. That's your breakaway. Check it at the beginning of the year, several times throughout the year, and especially if you brush up against something, put a 15/16 wrench on it. Make sure you can snug it up. I'm not talking no 100 pounds of torque. Just make sure it'll snug up. If it keeps turning like it's stripped, it has sheared and done its job. Go buy a lottery ticket and park the head. And then call Gary, and that's one of the advantages to the FD75 and newer is this. Yours, sir, is internally mounted on the end of this float arm. So they will have to pull your adapter and put a new breakaway on it and then put the adapter back in the head. Not a big deal compared to having to total a head and deal with insurance people, right? When they work, they're a beautiful thing. You can shear one in the morning and you can be harvesting in the afternoon. If you have a new style breakaway and everything checks out after you talk to Gary, oftentimes you can set this header down on the ground and pull forward slowly, square it back up in here, put a new breakaway in it, make sure your connections up here are good, and you can go back to harvesting. Now, if you thought I was on my soapbox a minute ago, this is where I really get on my soapbox. Because I've talked to a guy or two who's totaled their heads throughout the year. And everybody here knows where they total them. What part of the field were they cutting when they totaled their head? In the middle? No. He was joking. Out on the edges. When you guys are cutting your edges, slow down. Your cat-like reflexes can't stop these combines on a dime. Go slow. Smartest thing I've ever seen was a younger farmer over in Ohio last year. And when I got there with his FD2, he was cutting out in the middle. And out on the edge of every edge of his field was about 5, 6, 8 foot of uncut crop. And when he got done with the middle, he went back and he got that, and he could focus on just that 8 feet. So if something got caught on a stump or an oil well casing or a concrete post or something great-grandpa left there back in 1822, he could catch it. Another thing you can do, guys, since you're going slow, watch the header frame compared to the adapter frame. If you see it do that or do that, stop.